You found us! Welcome to Author Quick Draw. This is your permission slip to take a quick break from the hecticness of your newsfeed and hang out with me, Annie Bucknell, freelance feature writer and women's fiction author, as I get to spend some time playing Pictionary, giving away prizes and having fun with some of Australia's best loved authors. Now, we know that your favourite authors can tell incredible page-turning stories, but can they draw? We're about to find out live now in 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Quick Draw, and a big welcome to Heather Morris.
Hello. Do you want me to answer your question about whether or not authors can draw?
Yes, please.
No, well, this one can't. And she doesn't sing or dance either. She's not even convinced she can write.
Oh, you definitely can write. There is absolutely no doubt about that, Heather. And whether or not you can draw, you know what? It really doesn't matter with Pictionary. You'll be able to figure it out. Did you want to turn down slightly the volume on your computer for me?
I can do that.
Just because we're just getting a tiny bit of feedback through. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us, by the way. Just let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I'm speaking to you from Brisbane. Heather is holding strong like a trooper still in Melbourne lockdown. Obviously, that's not a great situation for authors that are debuting their new books, but we're excited to be able to chat to her tonight all the same. And yeah, if you could just give us a quick like and let us know that you can actually hear the video loud and clear, that would be great. Heather Morris, if you haven't already heard of her, she is an international best-selling author. She currently has 3 published novels to her name. The one you may have heard of, or you most certainly have heard of, would be The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which has sold over 11 million copies worldwide. That is a phenomenal amount of books to sell, Heather. Just absolutely incredible. And her latest book is called Stories of Hope. Now, it's a non-fiction novel, and it's all about, really, I would say, the art of truly listening and connecting to other people, which is actually how Heather was able to tell Lale's story through The Tattooist of Auschwitz. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But while we do, how this is going to work tonight, if you're watching for the first time, is Heather is going to, while I'm chatting to her and distracting her, unfortunately, draw her favourite movie for us. And then at the end of our little question, she's going to hold up the piece of paper, and the first one of you guys to actually correctly guess that movie title will take home a copy of Stories of Hope. So we'll get that mailed out to you. And it is, trust me, right now we all need this book in our life. It's the missing piece, I feel, for a lot of us. So Heather, you can start drawing at any time.
Thank you.
You can pick up the pen and paper. We're all good to go. So Stories of Hope. Talked about that is essentially, about the art of listening, and how, it really, listening was what actually brought you in touch with Lale Sokolov and got you writing The Tattooist of Auschwitz. So can you just tell people who might not be familiar with yours and Lale's story of how you two came to be connected and how you came to be gifted with permission to write his incredible life tale?
Well, here's your first lesson, folks. Unless you've got a good reason to say no when a friend or a family member asks you to do something or go with them somewhere, so unless you've got a good reason to say no, say yes. Because I said yes to catching up with a friend and having a cup of coffee, and she just casually said to me, "Oh, by the way, I have a friend whose mother has just died. His father has asked him to find somebody he can tell a story to. That person can't be Jewish. You're not Jewish. Do you want to meet him?" So when I asked her, well, what's his story? She said, "I don't know." And so again, I said yes, this time to meeting a complete stranger, Lale Sokolov. And a week later, I knocked on his apartment door. And the rest, as they say, is history.
It certainly is. And Lale, as you refer to in the book many times, was living history. For those who aren't really familiar with Lale's story, and obviously it can't be summarized here, what would you tell them about him? What would you like them to know about who he was?
Lale was a 25-year-old Slovakian Jewish man who was taken in April 1942 to Auschwitz. There he was made the Tattavera, the tattooist, and until January 1945, nearly 3 years later, that was the role he had. We call it tattooing. He called it numbering. I made the numbers. And that's what he did. He tattooed the numbers on the left arm of the men and the women, the boys and the girls who were selected to survive, selected to see the sun come up the next day. And it is there that he held the hand of a young girl dressed in rags and her head shaven and unbathed for months. And he looked up because he thought she was going to talk, and there were so many Nazis around them. And he looked up to go, shh. And at that moment, she looked at him, and he told me 60 years later in this quivering voice and with tears, I knew in that second I could never love another. My 25-year-old playboy from Krompaki in Slovakia was totally, madly falling in love under these circumstances with young Gita.
Yeah, and it's just, if you guys haven't read this, and I'm sure a lot of you who are watching tonight are fans of this book, it is the most incredible love story that you will ever read. And Lale and Gita's story it gives you hope for relationships, for connection, and for survival against all odds. So yeah, if you haven't read The Tattooist of Auschwitz, you most certainly need to. The line that you quote in this book, as well as obviously in the novel, is Lale saying that he tattooed her number on her arm, and she tattooed her number on his heart.
Yeah, her love in his heart.
Yeah.
Yes. Look, that word hope, and that's what the name of the book is about, hope. You kind of like, okay, stories of hope, and now you're going to tell us how to listen. But it's through listening that you find hope in the people you connect with and the things that you do. And that's why I was happy to have that as the title. And also, the word hope is the one word I can just about guarantee is in every single email or letter or conversation I have had since Lale's book came out.
Yep.
You have given me hope. And hey, folks, I have thousands of emails, and some of them, they tell me the most tragic and traumatic stories of people coping with all manner of things all around the world. And they find hope in the story. I've been to a maximum security prison south of London because 3 or 4 men read the book. These were maximum security, naughty boys. And they started telling other prisoners about this dude called Lale. And he was in a prison way worse than theirs. But he survived. He got out and he had a good life. Maybe there's hope that we can have a good life too when we get out. And from those few men reading it, telling other prisoners, the whole prison got caught up with, we'll be like Lale. And when the authorities wrote and told me this, yes, we arranged for me to go and spend 3 hours with 100 of these men one day.
That is absolutely incredible, Heather. And, what a wonderful thing that you've done to go and spend that time too. But even so, like, I first spoke to Heather, and Heather and I first met years ago when The Tattooist of Auschwitz originally came out, and I interviewed her about that experience. And one of the things that she told me, she talks about in this book too, is that when Lale was dying, and they'd spent, I think, 3 years by that point in friendship. Yeah.
Yes.
She promised that she'd never stop trying to tell his story.
Yeah.
And to hear that, I just think Lale would just be so touched to hear that he was reaching the hearts of men in prison, in London, that he was reaching the hearts of people all over the country, and that they, all over the world really, and that they would, were finding something within themselves through his tale. That's really such a gift that he's given us, but that you also gave the world by actually being present with him and being, this listener that you are. And I think that we all know what makes a bad listener. Like, if you've been through something tough, you know what it's like when you're, you're pouring your heart out to someone and they're just not listening. They're judging you. They're giving you advice that you don't want. They're waiting for you to take a breath so they can jump in and tell you how to fix your life. We all know what it's like to not really be heard and what that feels like. But I feel like we've lost the feeling of what it feels like to actually be really listened to. So, what is it that you think makes a good listener? There's obviously lots of different elements that you talk about in the book, but what's one key thing that you'd like viewers to take away tonight about what makes a good listener?
to be empathetic, to actually appreciate that there's somebody in front of you, or they might be on the phone, or they might be on a Zoom right now, but there is somebody has started to say something to you that does not warrant advice from you, does not warrant your 2 bobs worth. They are starting to tell you something. And at that point, if you can just register through either their words or their body language that, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I need to just take a step back here.
Mm-hmm.
When it goes quiet, and it will, don't feel the need to fill the gap. Just sit in that silence for a little while and see where it takes you. Or if you're uncomfortable there, you just repeat back the last thing you heard. Don't say anything more about it. Just repeat it back. Did you really just tell me that you think you're breaking up with your boyfriend or whatever? Tell them that you've heard them, and they will then carry on. But it is a matter of, as you say, of just shutting up and being in the moment. And so everybody wants to talk. We want to tell people, all manner of things, the good and the bad. But if you're going to just get opinion and feedback and be judged, well, you're not going to open up. You're not going to make yourself vulnerable. But if you really want to connect with somebody, that's the only way you can do it, is by listening to them. They're not going to write it down. They're not going to draw you a picture like I've just been trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
They need you to listen. And it's not rocket science.
Yeah, it's not, but it's something we seem to have really forgotten. I feel like this is such a pertinent book right now in our current climate, our social climate, our families, our friendships, our life, because, it just feels like there's so much division. And maybe if we could just listen to each other a little bit more, we would find much more common ground. I feel, I don't know. You certainly talk about, I've actually listened to the audio version of this as well, which is brilliant.
Okay. Oh, I haven't.
It was really good, and your intro was fabulous. But in that, you mentioned COVID and how that's threatening this elder generation, and all the stories that they have to tell, and all the things that could be lost to us if we lose the ability to actually really speak to our elders and listen to our elders and our peers and our children as well. You really go into hearing the voices of a child and what they have to say too. So just really powerful perspective. And for me, very humbling. I certainly had quite a few moments reading this where I was like, oh, I've not been going about this the right way. I think it's been a long time since I've truly been a great listener. So it was a great reminder.
And, we have busy lives, and we put it down to that. And I've been actually saying for some time now, way before pre-COVID, and by the way, I wrote this book pre-COVID too. I just went to put a little introduction in just before it went to the printers, because I felt I needed to comment on what 2020 has been to us, which is not a good year for us here in Australia in particular, the way it started out. But when I look at it, the biggest chapter is probably listening to your elders, because here's the thing, folks. The person who taught me how to listen was my great-grandfather.
Yes.
This amazing, beautiful old man, the only person in my life growing up who took the time to A, talk to me, and B, listen to me, and then tell me and teach me how to listen, not just to people talking, but to our environment and what's going on around us. Just sometimes when I was with him, which was most days, by the way, after school, he lived 2 paddocks away from me. And he would just say, no, today we're just going to sit and listen. And after the first 1 or 2 times, we go, what are you talking about, Gramps? You say something, and he would just go, shh, just listen. And all of a sudden, the noises around me, they took on meaning. And at the time of the afternoon, which they would be after school, I would hear the dogs rounding up the cows to be taken to be milked. I hear my mother yelling at my 4 brothers, and these sounds, and just the sound of my great-grandmother in the kitchen. We were always out on his little veranda, banging pots and pans. But then again, it was also then listening to Lally, again, elderly person. Right now, I'm listening to these 2 amazing ladies. Well, we're only listening to one who's got okay English. Sister Magda's is not so good. But then 94 and 96,
Wow.
COVID, I can't go back to Israel and spend more time with them. But
Yeah.
I'm having to do it by a video on our phones. And also I can kind of figure that I'm actually getting into that realm of the elder. So, hey, somebody want to listen to me?
Absolutely. And you know, that story that you're writing now actually came to you again from saying yes. So it just really, you know, it really shows that pathway of just being open to life, what that's done for you. I wonder if your great grandfather knew at the time that he was training a writer by training you to listen.
No, look, I think he just felt sorry for me being the only girl with these very four rowdy, boisterous brothers. Mind you, I could hold my own with them. It really wasn't an issue for me. But, and also, I think he found that he was at that age, like Lully, where they actually do want to talk. You do want to tell somebody about the times in your life which are memorable to you. And I do not accept when I hear so many other elderly people say, but I'm just an ordinary person. If they come up to me when I'm giving talks, and I go, no, you're not. You are extraordinary. You are remarkable. And there are parts of your life and journeys throughout your life that you really want to tell somebody about. You want to share. And they go, but it's not a whole book's worth of it. It doesn't have to be. Just find a connection with someone. And I hope they do. But I think when you're the older person, you can't necessarily go and ask somebody to listen.
Yeah.
So this is where it falls on you, other younger family members.
Yeah.
Look at your grandparents. Walk into their home that you've gone to hundreds of times. Look for that ornament that's on the mantelpiece or that picture that's been on the wall all your life. And just ask somebody, can you remember when you got this? Can you remember what its significance it is? Because it's there for a reason. It has importance to them. And it's quite simple. We've just got to show that you're prepared to listen. You will be the one that will be rewarded.
Absolutely.
Spending time with anybody, young, old, in between, except maybe teenagers. You know, they're a different kettle of fish altogether.
Oh, we all have to survive those years somehow. But you know, that's kind of sad, isn't it? That you do get contacted or you come into contact with elderly people that want somebody to talk to tell their story to, and they just don't even know how to start the conversation. So that's a real eye opener for us on the other end of the life spectrum. That, you know, lots of people do want to open up. They just want to be given the invitation to do it.
Yeah. And to realise that you'll spend more than 2 minutes with them and you won't judge or comment.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. You know, 90% of our day, we are in conversation with people. Mm-hmm. And that's that two-way thing. They say something, you say something. I'm not saying you don't do that. Gosh, even I have to do that all day, every day. But just occasionally realise and try and recognise in a friend or a family member that it could be maybe we're sitting down and having a longer chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that came across with, you know, that you could be surprised what you find out really about someone. And one of the things that came across with Lully is that, you know, it was really important to him not only to find someone who was non-Jewish and didn't have, you know, this kind of preconceived notion of the events that had happened in his life, but somebody who wasn't going to judge him, because there was a lot of complicated emotions that he had about having to tattoo the numbers on his fellow inmates' arms. Like, that is a huge burden really to carry. And I think that if you had have come across, or if you had a sense that you might have judged him for it, he may never have actually opened up to you at all. So I guess what I want to know is, you know, how do you think that judgment actually impacts our ability to listen and stops people from opening up? Because it does feel like it's human nature to sort of judge at times, but how do we not let that kind of become a roadblock between us and another person?
And here's the thing, actually, if you are with somebody and they're saying something, and even if you're only judging them in your head, I can tell you your body language will let them know. They will pick up on it. I don't know. I just have never, ever felt like I wanted to ever judge anybody for any decision they make. We just don't get to do that. And I was thinking about the current situation we're in right now, way, way different to the Holocaust. And while there's no way I would ever think of judging anybody for surviving. And by the way, how dare you think that you can judge somebody because they chose to survive the most evil, horrific period of history. But even right now in lockdown here in Melbourne, and I have, with friends, we're connecting and talking, and they will say, look, I've just done absolutely nothing today. Look, I've done this, eat chocolate biscuits and just sit on the sofa and read a book or watch TV or whatever. And I go, that's okay. She said, well, does that make me a bad person? Hell no. You are surviving. We are surviving the toughest lockdown in the world. And I'm surviving it differently to you. And we all are, but it's the old, unless you can walk a mile in somebody's shoes, you don't judge. That's what the saying is. But here's the thing, you just be damn grateful you don't ever have to walk a mile in the shoes of a Holocaust survivor or anybody who has gone through something.
Absolutely. And I do, I've heard you say, when you've come across criticism of Lale's choices, or, people think that they know what they would have done in that situation, you sort of said, like, you weren't there, you do not get to judge, you have no idea. None of us really have any idea unless we were there, and only us, it's just it's a terrible situation. But it actually goes further than that. Like you said, not just, reserving judgment, for Holocaust survivors is one thing, but it goes past that into, reserving the judgment of our family and our friends and the people that we meet and the people we talk to through business. And that's probably why you were such a great social worker as well, because that does require to just be able to be with people and know that you couldn't actually know that what choices you'd make in their circumstances.
And in a lot of those circumstances, give thanks that you're not in their shoes. But you can only help somebody. And by helping, I mean just listening to them is helping. It's as simple as that. And right up front in this book, by the way, I make the disclaimer. I am not qualified to tell anybody how to live their life, what to do under any circumstances. No qualifications for that at all. And I don't want to, because only when you're actually face to face with somebody and hearing and seeing what's going on in their life, can you offer, if they ask, and only if they ask, some kind of opinion on, do you want to get some help from somebody with regard to that? Is there somebody else you need to talk to? So yes, I'm not going to tell anybody how and what to do, including myself. I don't intend to tell myself enough. And that actually comes part to one of the other parts of the book that I've written too, which is actually called Listening to Yourself. Because to me, that is also terribly important. And that sounds weird. How do you listen to yourself? Well, we don't do it, which is why it sounds weird, and we don't know how to practice it. And it's once again not rocket science. It's a matter of finding 5 minutes every now and then to just be by yourself and to don't listen to that thing in your head which is running you down and is negative. Gosh, I know I say things about myself at times that I would never say to anybody else.
Yeah.
It's so easy to be negative towards ourselves, but listen to what you're actually really feeling in here and up here, and what's my body telling me in terms of it's sluggish, it's not wanting to move today. It's telling you something. You're not going to, by the way, you're not spend the next 24 hours sitting there staring at the wall going, what's going on, Bob? It's not like that. You know what I'm talking about. It's just every now and then taking the time. It's called self-care, by the way, as this other word.
Yep, and that check-in, and, you could get that check-in through meditation or through just mindfulness and all those sorts of things, but it is so, so important. And one of the things that, you've flipped the tables a little bit on yourself. You're actually, a little bit of, biographical information in here in your story as well of your childhood and things like that is all in here. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was that the whole way through, I feel like you were listening to your heart and making your decisions based on what's right for you, not what's right for your family and their paradigm and the way that the values that you were raised in, but really what was right for you, and it's led you to the most incredible life. So I think listening to yourself is a really important message from this book too.
Yeah, I do too. In fact, it's the most important message in there. Even though I play with the elders and the children and going the extra mile. And here's the thing, you're going to learn more in the book about my life with Lully and my time with him. And that seems to be what people are interested in now. Once you've read the book, you don't want to hear me talking about it. Yeah, you know it. Now move on, girl. Tell me something else about this man. From an 87-year-old man, not the 25-year-old that you've written about. And I have so many amazing stories of my 3 years with him. And so, yes, I do get to now share a few of those. I do when I'm talking to people, but to put it down in writing and give you a little more insight into Lully Sokolov. And also to me, it was important to talk about how I got to write Silke's story and the lengths I went to make sure I wrote her story as accurately and as compassionately and as I could. That was huge for me.
Absolutely. And Silke features quite heavily in the Tattooist of Auschwitz, and someone who was very important to Lully's journey there, and Gita, and writing her story was another really big, important journey that I think you had to take, because everybody wanted. I remember finishing it and saying to you on that first interview, what happened to Silke? What happened? I needed to know, because these are real people. These aren't just characters in a novel. These are real stories. And I genuinely was concerned for her well-being in her life. So to be able to then go and read the pain and all those things in her journey, but really the hope and the strength that was threaded throughout was so important as well. So both just amazing novels. When it comes to stories of hope, what impact overall, I suppose, are you hoping that it has on your readers? So what's the one thing you really are hoping that people will take away from this?
Somewhere I read that hope is the last thing that dies in us. And this is something that I can talk to from personal experience many, many times. Working in a hospital environment, you're very, very privileged to be there with perfect strangers. And hearing that word, that was a word that I heard for 20 years every day. I guarantee I heard it every day as a family member or a patient would say, I hope I can live long enough to see my grandchild born. I hope that my mother can live long enough to see somebody get married. They wanted that word hope. Everybody was hoping, the patients, the family members, the friends, to just something extra, a little bit longer. And that's what they clung to.
Yeah.
And even people who knew that they were not going to, get well from a diagnosis they had. Look, I just hope I can live long enough to whatever. And so hang on to hope. It's a word and we throw it out there all the time, but it can have very, very deep meanings. And that whole notion of learning how to listen. So they're the two things. Use that word hope, but when you use it, actually have some actual gut feeling behind using it, and mean that you want to use the word, and then use that word to move forward.
And I think we all could do with a bit of hope for a better world right now.
Oh yes, please, vaccine, that'll be good.
Yeah,
get me out of here.
Absolutely. Can you tell us just what can you share about the novel that you're working on? I know you talk a little bit about coming to find the story in Stories of Hope, but what are we able to know about the next Heather Morris novel?
Now, don't say, oh, no, not another Holocaust story. It is and it isn't, okay? But Three Sisters, and that's the title I think it's going to be, not that just, it's just going to be Three Sisters. 15, 17, and 19. And I came to this story because in June last year, I was in South Africa and I got back to my hotel room one night and I was in the wine region, so you can imagine what I was doing till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I read an email from somebody. So here I am, a Kiwi living in Australia, now currently in South Africa. And I get an email from a man who lives in Toronto in Canada, He's just flown to visit his mum in Tel Aviv in Israel. And he wrote telling me he picked up the book at the airport at Toronto, and that morning he had left it on his mum's coffee table. And his mum had walked past and looked down and just said, "That must be about Lali and Gita." So this lady, Olivia, she's now 94. She and her sisters had gone to school with Gita. They came from the same town. They were on the same train going to Auschwitz. Livia's number is 3 away from Gita's.
Wow.
Her sister Sibby's is 2 away. And they remembered Lali numbering them. But also Gita had visited them in Israel in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And from that one email, I sent an email back, and within a couple of days, several emails had crisscrossed. I'd made it to Johannesburg, where I rang and spoke to this beautiful lady, 93-year-old lady. And she's just saying, "I have to see you. I've got so much I can tell you." And she started telling me little things. And I'm going, holy moly, I want this story. And so I wrote to the publishers in London and sent them the emails. And I said, I need to go and see this lady. I need to spend time with her. And then I found myself in Johannesburg and about to fly back to Melbourne. And I was talking to my publisher, Kate, in London. And I said, look, when I get back to Melbourne, I've got to go to Israel. And she said, "You're not going home." She said, "We're just straight from Johannesburg to Tel Aviv." I went, "But Kate, I've run out of clean knickers." She said, "I learned to wash them. I'll buy some." But within 24 hours, yes, I arrived in Tel Aviv with, none of the local currency, no language, no idea where I was. But within a couple of hours, I was sitting in the apartment of Livia. Now, Livia and her sister, 2 years older than her, Magda, they are still both alive.
Wow.
94 and 96, and the oldest sister, Sibby, just died only a couple of years ago. But you want to know about their story? Okay, so yes, they survived Auschwitz.
Yeah, all 3 sisters.
And exactly, absolutely, so unusual. We're just actually trying to find out just how unusual it is. So we're consulting the academics and historians. But their storyline of how they survived, once again, so different to everybody else's. And this actually reinforces when I get on my high horse about not telling the story of the Holocaust, just a Holocaust story. And are my facts correct because nobody else can support them? Well, it's these people's memories, and that's all that matters.
Oral history is so important.
It's got to be about the memories of those.
Yeah.
And by the way, I found out only a year or so ago that in Hebrew, there is no word for history. No word at all in Hebrew, that all the stories must be from the memories of those who lived them.
Yeah.
But they had their survival is absolutely amazing. Their escape from the death march in January 1945, middle of winter in Poland, through Poland and into Germany. Again, phenomenal what these young girls had to do to survive, running from the Nazis on a death march, only to find themselves, when they did get back to Slovakia, once again being rejected. And so here they are, and what are they to do? Well, they did the only thing they thought they could. They joined several other young Jewish boys and girls, Holocaust survivors, who made it back to Slovakia, went out into the forests in Czechoslovakia for 3 months and trained to become freedom fighters.
Wow.
They are a group of those pivotal people who had to be smuggled all the way through Czechoslovakia into Romania, all under communist rule, to the Black Sea and get on board a boat. And that boat took them to Haifa in Israel. There, at that pivotal point in history, as Palestine and Israel were battling to see how this would play out.
Yeah.
Could the Jewish people get the promised land that they wanted? And you can read about, of course, the establishment of Israel in the history books, and you'll get it from the politicians and the bureaucrats and the military and the United Nations who created it, rightly or wrongly. I do not touch on the politics of Palestine versus Israel, but just recognize once again the bravery of these 3 young girls and going out into this country where they had no idea what awaited them there. and being those founding, normally we say founding fathers, don't we? But founding girls and establishing this amazing country. And you'll hear about that from the perspective of people who actually were there, grassroots.
There's barely any words sometimes for the stories that you tell on behalf of survivors, Heather. That's incredible. When's that due to come out? I can't wait to
17th of October next year, if I can hope.
17th of October next year. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a date. And
yes, and hopefully you'll be able to actually tour that around the world into some of the places that are really important to the story as well. How are you going with your drawing, by the way?
Yeah, I've got something here.
Excellent. All right, let's hold that up. And
all right, I warned you. I did warn you.
Okay. All right, come right close into the camera with a piece of paper if you can.
You kind of need it all.
Okay, I feel like, all right, so the comments will start coming in now with the guess. Okay. All right. Oh, hang on. Hold it up at the bottom. Are they numbers?
Roman.
Maybe. All right. Good. Think we're getting there. Yep. Okay.
It will help if you know Roman numerals.
It would, actually. Okay, so can you tell us? Oh, we've already got. I reckon the first guess is going to be the right one. So there's just a little bit of a delay here, but we've got a guess come through. Tracy Anderson is guess 13. Perfect. Well done, Tracy. I'll get your details after this live stream, and we'll send it on to Heather's people to get you a copy of Stories of Hope.
Thank you, Tracy.
13. Well done.
This is a story of survival, and my gosh, does the word hope ever feature in these three astronauts that needing to get back to Earth? I have watched it so many times. I never tire of watching this film. The performances are superb. Of course, now Tom Hanks has never done a bad acting job ever anyway.
No, he hasn't.
Maybe Turner and Hooch. Yeah, never mind. But yes, it's one of those, once again, true stories. I love them.
Yeah, you know what? You can tell, like your whole life, that's what you've been drawn to, and you're a storyteller in the sense that you don't just tell your own stories, but you're gifted stories to tell as well. And obviously, there's a whole lot of trust that goes into that. So, well done. And I honestly can't wait to read Three Sisters if that's the title that ends up settling on. I know that it'll be amazing. There's just a couple questions just to wrap up from our writing community, because obviously I know that you say you don't believe that you're an author, but you are, and you are a wonderful storyteller, Heather. So that's part of the magic and the charm of what you do. So one of the questions we have is, when you base your stories on someone from real life, how is it that you decide what you're going to put in and what you're going to leave out? It's pretty tough.
That is tricky, because sometimes, and with Lully, there was two aspects of things that I left out. For example, there are one or two things that he witnessed which was so painful for him, incredibly painful, and he asked me not to write them. Don't tell that. But he shared them with me, and I think he got some kind of release in being able to share them with me. But also in telling his story, there were one or two things, well, there's more than that actually, which they were historically significant, already written about in the history books, but his role in them was not mentioned in anything that we could find. And I had to say to him, I cannot tell that part of your story. And he got really cranky with me, but you must. It was important to him. But I knew that I was going to get some kind of problem anyway, that the potential for me to be questioned over his story was always going to happen, and I was prepared for it. But I left a couple of things out in particular, which were really, really significant. And since the book come out, here's the bugger of it. People have written to me from other countries
to verify,
confirmed what it was and his role in these significant historical events.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I leave out? I left things out where, look, there was something that I heard that I thought, well, you don't need to know that about Lully. I'm trying to think. I didn't pull any punches. I've actually had people write to me and say, I liked your book, but I don't think I like Lully Sokolov. Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, I think he was too much of a grifter and he's an opportunist. And I went, hell yeah, he was an opportunist. He needed to be. But that's okay. I totally respect their opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone's entitled to an opinion.
No, I got into trouble by putting into Silka's story by coming out and identifying the rape and the sexual abuse with which she suffered for all those years, not just in the Holocaust, but also in Siberia. Yeah. And I have been criticized for doing that. And one of the criticisms when we know the publishers and I, we go looking at why is it that I seem to be about the first person that has now gone and written a story that says girls and women in the Holocaust in particular, and also in Siberia, were raped and sexually abused. Yeah. And as you can imagine, historians and academics can come at us from all kinds of angles. But when we drill it down with them, they say, well, look, all you're doing is shaming these women. And I go, the hell I am.
It's not their shame.
It's not their shame. It's our shame. Mm. And even more so when we think it's only been a matter of a few handful of years that educated celebrity women have come out and started the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. If it's taken educated celebrity women years to find the courage to stand up and say, this is what's happened to me by these powerful men, what chance did these young girls and women have of ever being able to speak up? And when we looked at the testimonies, that when they were made testimonies, and there's a lot of Holocaust testimonies being made, they were never asked the question.
Weren't they?
They were never asked that question.
I'm astounded because sexual violence in war, they go hand in hand. Yeah.
And part of the thinking was, well, if they came out and asked the question and the women answered it honestly, that if their families heard about it, that nobody would want to marry them. That they would be tainted. And so it was better to just brush it under the carpet because it does not fit the narrative of the death of 6 million Jewish people during the Holocaust. So that there was no question that I was going to call that out for what it was and not allow these women to be considered spoils of war or comfort women, or to use this horrible, horrible language to describe their abuse. So I had no problem putting that in. But I don't really leave anything out that I find, other than, as I say, one or two things that Lolly specifically asked me not to mention.
Yeah, or the things that you said, like that you might have struggled to verify if they were historically significant and things like that. And his Mengele story really it comes up in this Stories of Hope as well. So there's
I could have written about Mengele, would have filled his book. And that was another thing.
And what a shame that would have been.
You say more about Mengele about this because his contact with him was so much. And I said, no, Lolly, because your story is not about Mengele. It's not his story, it's yours. So he's in it, but to the smallest degree possible.
Yeah, because he just would have overshadowed it, and what a shame that would have been, because we would have lost Lale and Gita in Mengele, and we all know who he was and what he did, but nobody knew about Lale, and that's the gift that that book certainly has given us as well. So the Tattooist of Auschwitz originally was a screenplay. How did it go from screenplay to published novel?
Because no bugger in Hollywood would look at my script. And rightfully so. Who am I, sort of down here writing a screenplay through a couple of lessons online and a few workshops on weekends? I just wasn't getting any traction. And I was visiting my brother and sister-in-law in San Diego and complaining about them 100 miles up the road, Hollywood. And my sister-in-law, just one night, I think she was sick and tired of me carrying on. And she just looked at me. She said, oh, for goodness sake, write the bloody thing as a book and get on with it. Okay, well, I'll give it a go. So that's how it went from screenplay to novel, because my sister-in-law called me out for all my grizzling and whinging. And
now you found yourself as a novelist.
Yeah.
So thank you. Pardon me? Sorry.
I'm just saying thank you, Peggy.
Yes, absolutely. And have you been able to actually use the screenplay that you've written for the rights that you've sold for the Tattooist of Auschwitz?
Oh gosh, no, they want nothing to do with me as a screenwriter.
Ah,
I'm the script
what?
consultant.
Oh,
But
that's good at least.
yeah, I think there's 3 screenwriters that have written the miniseries, and
Yeah.
so I get sent their scripts, and there've been a couple of times that I went, no, you can't do that. No, you can't change that. You cannot play with history. But yeah, these brilliant screenwriters, no, they wouldn't want me writing. Oh gosh, no.
I'm so surprised by that, because you literally wrote a screenplay first. So yeah, but I guess it is, as you say, it's a very hard club to break into, that one.
Yes, and that craft of writing, particularly a miniseries for television, it's all about timing and pacing, way more than writing a feature film. You know that the audience is going to sit there for 2 hours uninterrupted, but to tell something over 6 hours with ad breaks and breaks for the episodes, all that kind of pacing, wow, no, that's a real craft. I'm never going to get there.
It certainly is. Well, you've mastered the craft of the novel, so I think you can definitely well and truly call yourself a novelist now, and thank heavens for that. There's lots of comments here tonight, guys. Thank you so much for all the comments you're leaving about this amazing story that Heather has told, stories, and her incredible book. I've not time really to go through all of them, but we'll go through and respond to some of them offline later. Heather, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time tonight. You've been so generous. You've had a full day. It's very late where you are now, and for everybody who's watching. Wish you all the best for the success of Stories of Hope. I'm really glad that you took the time to write this nonfiction book and share with us what you know about being a listener and a confidant and really a friend. There's something in there for all of us, and I know I personally will take away a few of those lessons and that reflection for future. So really appreciate that, and I'm really looking forward to next year when we can read your next novel and hear about the journey of the 3 sisters.
Oh, Annie, thank you. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you tonight, and anytime, all right?
Absolutely. Now, where can people find you if they want to keep up to date and make sure they've got, publication release dates, all that sort of thing? What's the best place?
Well, there's a website. Look, I have a website called Your Stories of Hope. And in that we actually ask people to write any short story they have about where they found hope in their lives. We've got some amazing stories being sent to us from all around the world. A few of them have given me permission, and I've read them out on a Facebook event that I do. But we're compiling them, and the publishers in London are talking with all the people who have submitted. So if you've got a story that you want to just write down, just to write it down, get it out. You can't find anybody to listen to you, and you feel that, well, I'm going to write it down. Then go to yourstoriesofhope.com and just hit the submit button. My publishers will get it. They will send it for me to reading. We will respond, and we will see where you want to go with it. And if there's any way that they, using the editorial services, can help you, write it better, you want to have some help there to put it in a short story competition, all these things are available. So yourstoriesofhope.com.
That's just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And guys, yeah, absolutely. If you've got a story that you want to share that makes people feel hopeful, well, the world really needs a little bit more of that right now. So
you can go and read several on the website too. People who have given us permission to put them up for people to read, and just have a read. God, they're so inspiring.
Absolutely brilliant. You can also go and like Heather's Facebook page, and updates on, all her release dates and things and events that she's in will be on there as well. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight, guys. We've got a bit of a break next week, so we've got a pause, and then we'll be back the week after speaking to Monique Mulligan with a very moving women's fiction story. So Heather, thanks again for joining us, guys. Have a great night, and all the best with the rest of your launch.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Good night, Annie. Good night, folks.
Thank you.
It's about time for that cup now, don't you think? Thank you so much for joining me tonight, guys. I hope you had as much nerdy fun as I did chatting to some of our absolute favourite best-selling authors. You will never believe the people I have lined up for us in the next couple of weeks. So to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the fun or really any of the giveaways, be sure that you've liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel, Annie Bucknell, or like me on Facebook where we go live at 7:30 every Thursday night. You can also find me on Instagram at annie.bucknell where I share more of my daily life and my daily battle trying to write a novel and file freelance feature articles with a toddler in tow. It's good fun. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.